Thank you, Scott. Such a pleasure being here today. So welcome to the new world of work, everyone. The one thing for sure we know is that the wheels of business must move forward. So today we'll look at ways to make that happen with two visionaries in the world of finance. As we start to return to our new normal, many organizations are choosing to embrace a hybrid model to allow both in-person office collaboration and remote work. Speaking of building a global and geographically dispersed workforce, how can we work with the talents, right? And today, they can work anywhere in the world. There are certainly benefits for companies that want to recruit a diverse and inclusive workforce. And according to Gartner, the finance organization has become increasingly flattened today. So what that means that senior finance leaders manage more employees and functions than ever before. So how do they hire, train, retain the next-gen digital savvy finance professionals and unleash their potential? And according to Microsoft Job Report, 2021 is the great resignation year, with 39% of the global workforce considering leaving their employer. There's also talent supply and demand gap, with 45% of college grads are still looking for a job, according to CBS News. Well, 9.3 million jobs are unfilled in the USA today, according to USA Today. You think about the finance team has truly transitioned so much these days. It's not only just a transition from being efficient to being resilient, and also about the digital activation for financial leaders. Now the data collection effort have really expanded because every organization becomes more remote, right? They want more information than less these days, because part of it is information explosion, and the finance team also feel pressure to do many things more than what they used to do. And then also because of increase in organizational complexity, right, due to the hybrid working model, the finance team plays a more strategic role, as both of you mentioned earlier. So that's being said, Alex, what are the changes you've seen in the role of finance in that past few years? Why do you think these changes are happening?
I think you just hit it right on the point. That the changes I've seen is that sort of, that strategic lens that's being asked upon finance. So, instead of just saying, here are your numbers, here's what you've done for the month and you're 10% behind, finance is being leaned into, like, what drove that underperformance? What are some things that the business can do to course correct? And so, that strategic lens is being, asked upon the finance organization. And, when I've been sort of networking with other CFOs and VPs of finance in the industry, what they like, their finance teams to be is not just CFOs to their business partners, but also COOs, such that they know the operational aspects of the business. What I like to tell people at the end of the day, the financials of a company are sort of the outputs of the strategy and the operational execution. And so by knowing both, as a finance person, you'll know what the numbers that you're looking at on the screen mean. And so I think those are the biggest things. And obviously that's more from an FP&A or strategic finance side of things, is being more strategic, but also on the accounting side, trying to, again, draw some insights versus just saying, okay, these are what the numbers say, what they are.
Absolutely. Rob, what are the things that finance leader can do today to respond to these changes?
Yeah, when I reflect on our journey, I think we've moved finance from just being in charge of the lagging indicators to really get involved in the leading indicators, right? Mm-hmm. And those things actually go in many different directions, because you go through sales all the way through to customers, right? From what's coming in, you're working with the business leaders on purchasing and what they're thinking of buying, and then you're also understanding where we are with our employees and what our plans are for their growth, and bringing all them together. So a push from me to finance to get involved in the business, but then also take on a mentoring and educational role in the business. So I mentioned before that we talk about empowering the business and other employees with the data. And let's not assume that they understand everything about finance. So during our all hands, for example, our lead finance person will actually talk about the numbers and go through and give explanations. And I give him the time to explain what's happening. And if he's not there, one of his team members, Jennifer or Kushum in Sydney, she will take over the slot, connect with people in the company, even though she's the financial controller, but she'll explain the numbers and what's going on and the perspectives of what's there. So we take it as an opportunity whenever anyone connects and we're showing numbers to actually explain the reasons behind them and the context that we're looking at them.
That's a great point. If everybody in the organization, including your product team, engineering team, understand how they can contribute to that overarching goal, you have greater chance of success overall. Well, that leads to the next question here, right? Finance leaders really these days need to make sure their team feel being part of a community. So with this kind of change, geographically, dispersed and remote, how do you really make sure everyone feels that they're part of the team and stay motivated? So I'll start with Rob.
We started doing a lot of mental skills training actually before COVID and before this wave in the company. And with the advent of DEI and a lot of the pressures that come on managers and leaders in the business to do their jobs and also be socially aware and be progressive and make sure that we're moving things the right way. And a lot of our work and philosophy comes down to understanding anxiety that people have. And we all have that. And whether that's, at home or at work, that stress is stress, right? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really matter where the stress comes from. And so from that, being able to appreciate that everyone has different anxieties and not to project those anxieties on people just because we've read them on Twitter or it's the latest trend, right? And so then that leads for us into empathy and trying to understand and doing our best part of that. And of course, when you're trying to build empathy, vulnerability is the way from your side that you can build that bridge, right? And so we've been doing work at that level so that Rocketeers can be well equipped, that they're not thinking tactics, they're just becoming better people. And I think that's our role as companies. So we're doing a lot of live streaming, working different mechanisms. We have a concept of close the loop. So as we're rolling out changes, mm-hmm. we're trying to become good at change, right? So we have this little philosophy where we put out this pie chart of every change. Like, so we might say, hey, benefits are changing in the Indian office, right? Mm-hmm. Or there is another benefit change here, and we'll highlight in that little pie chart how many people are affected, because it's very hard for people to get a grasp of how big the change is. Does it apply to them? What is the impact? And so we're trying to really build these little protocols so that if we're rolling through 10 or 15 changes a month, they can easily understand which ones apply to them. Mm-hmm. and work out which ones they can filter out, right? Because there's also information overload, right?
Yeah, those are great practice. Thanks for sharing that. Alex, what about you? Anything to share with the audience here?
Yeah, absolutely. And Rob, I found your insights pretty interesting and definitely helpful. Yeah, those are the things I've seen, at Tipalt, the short time I've been here, but also in my previous roles in companies, some of the things when you're working with remote teams, I definitely get the point of you don't want to create the anxiety, but I think part of the anxiety also comes in, and it depends, with different teams, different companies, is that people feel disconnected. So if they don't know necessarily what's going on, and all of a sudden they just see sort of a new news flash about a new product, a new implementation, that's something that they feel out of the loop and not as engaged or not as part of the company. And so what I felt was effective is the transparency and making sure it gets communicated, and then people are aware sort of of the big things that are going on with the company, and that the right stakeholders are in the loop. And in terms of engagement, what I've found to be effective is in just in terms of, aligning, whether it be quarterly or annual goals, and sort of, like the OKRs, that they are sort of aligned from, the company to the team to the individual, such that people know what they're doing is contributing to the overall company goals. And that obviously, as the year goes on, things may change, but those tweaks need to be adjusted again to make sure what people are working on makes sense, and that it aligns to what the company is trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's so critical. As a finance leader, you have to put more, like, think about how you invest in your digital savvy younger generation workforce, not only for that, and also how you upskill, rescale your employees. But as there are many fintech tools out there, the finance roles are evolving, right? How do you continue developing your employee and empowering them to become the next gen digital savvy finance professionals? Rob, I'm going to start with you.
So I mentioned that we built this career pathing and put a lot of work into that. And a big piece of what we're doing with that is also trying to tie what education or knowledge is either needed or required at different levels. Mm-hmm. Well, one thing we built in that system was we allow Rocketeers to, we not only show them where they are in the career path, but we ask them, where do you want to go? And we also ask them, what are you interested in? And so they're able to like click and star different things in the career matrix. And so we have actually a lot of knowledge now of, the manager might have their perspective on a particular Rocketeer, but we've also got their voice. So we can understand, great, if we have a lot of demand in a particular area, then we know, we need to address that demand and take care of it, right? And so that's been one thing. The next one has been just really trying to simplify our environment and simplify the number of tools and things that we use. And so for us, that was centering around NetSuite, which, Tipalt has been such a great addition to us and really streamlining that whole process on the payable side. But just the less number of tools that people have to use, the better. And so we just keep coming back to methodology. So we're training our finance team in, systems and agile methodology, right? How to build an agile system. So educating them, I guess, more at a methodology level has been really, really good for us, and involving them in the build of systems. And nearly everyone in the team is involved in some way or form in that process. And versus, I guess maybe what might have been done traditionally, where we have the manager might give the requirements and the IT team will do it and throw something back and go forth.
Great one. Alex, any thoughts here?
Yeah, no, this is a question near and dear to my heart. As I mentioned sort of before, one of the things that I'm really sort of passionate about is trying to understand, how we can, how I can make my teams more efficient, and then sort of like, taking things off their plate that can be sort of done by software applications. So in Tipalt, one of the things, when I've come on board is to be able to sort of assess the landscape on the finance side and understand, the things that we can put in place to be able to, take care of, again, sort of processes that again are being done offline or in Excel, but then we know that to be able to make that repeatable, that takes a huge amount of effort and will require multiple or more resources. So, again, is there a financial tool that we can look at, whether it be on the FP&A side, an FP&A planning tool, or sort of like a SaaS, management, inventory tool, things like that. And what we try to do, and what I've always sort of asked my teams to be able to look at is that consider and look at things that you are doing. One, are you doing it just to do it? Like, is there any, audience that really needs the data? Is it like very critical? But two, if it is, and if it's repeatable, is there a way to help like automate it, whether it be, running sort of, putting it in a dashboard and like in a BI tool, such that it can be, there's multiple people that can sort of look at it and it's an easy dashboard that can be pulled up? Or are there other sort of things, whether it be Obviously on the AP side, that can be automated because it could be a very manual process to, receivables and the billings to be able to look at those types of things. And so, just getting people open-minded to be thinking about those types of things. So again, they can focus their time on more strategic value-add activities versus having to do something that, it requires a heavy lift and it's not scalable. And so like getting that mindset into people and in terms of developing their skills, offering the trainings. But, one thing what I try to do is when I, write and establish sort of annual goals is try to put like, even on the finance side, putting down sort of, like you have to take a training or like some sort of class to be able to develop your skill set. So, for a lot of finance folks, they get into a lot of, business insights and business intelligence. So does it make sense to take a SQL class and be able to like query something? Because you're dealing with large amounts of data. So like sort of, forcing people to make sure that they keep their skills current, but also that they're considering, other tools out there, because like you mentioned, there's so many out there that you don't want to necessarily recreate the wheel. You want to leverage some of the best in class that's already proven and that's been out there.
That's so critical, right? Both of you made very critical points here. But one thing I would really share here is that as a finance person, it's so critical for us to learn how to speak our business counterparts language, right? If you're going to talk to a sales leader, you better really understand what are the factors that drives sales, right? I mean, maybe the shorter sales cycle, the higher average selling price, all those things will really contribute to a bigger number. So if you really understand their world, understand what matters to them, when you communicate with them, understand you don't schedule a meeting the last few days, a quarter with them to talk about budgeting or talk about numbers, right? You really wanted to figure out, right, put yourself in their shoes to think about how do you support them in the most effective way without really becoming a burden when interacting with your functional leaders. That's so critical as well. We talk about the talent supply and demand gap. I'd love to hear, let's start with Alex, right? There's, what are the strategies you have put in place to really provide opportunity to inexperienced employees out there to really breach this talent pool gap?
Yeah, no, this is definitely a relevant conversation and something I've sort of tried to address in my past. I know you kind of have to be, open-minded, creative, and willing to sort of take that risk, because again, you're going to have to be doing a little bit more hand-holding than versus someone that has a couple of years of experience. But because of how competitive the market has been, I've had a couple of instances where bringing on a junior resource, instead of looking for that person with 1 to 2 years experience, I've taken a couple different tracks. One is looking at someone internally. I know there was an instance where I was hiring for a senior, like a finance analyst, and there was someone on a different team, like an operations team at one of my former companies, that had a finance background. They couldn't find a job, so they just sort of got something that they can get, and it happened to be sort of like on the customer success side. But like knowing that they had an interest in finance, they had their degree in finance, we were willing to sort of talk to them and bring them on board, to be able to start ramping up on sort of like the FP&A team. And so an instance like that, again, being more open-minded, thinking of different ways to sort of fill those roles. And in another instance, hiring for a junior accountant, I had to, again, sort of, look to, hiring someone straight out of college, because I guess on this side, we wanted to be able to, kind of, again, take that risk and sort of set expectations that it's going to take a little bit more time to get them going. But, identified someone that was hungry, that was ambitious, that was resilient. And then we knew that, that upfront investment would sort of pay off in the long term, because we can sort of almost, sort of teach them the right way to do things versus them being a little bit more jaded or doing things and maybe taking some shortcuts. Is, you can sort of, bring them along and teach them the right way. And so I think it comes down to the teams setting the right expectations and, getting the buy-in that, like, like we're going to have to look at someone a little bit more like sort of, just sort of, green, but in the long run, it could pay off and do much better to be able to fill through the needs that you have trying to recruit people.
So we all have those moments, right? If we had the right mentor, the right mindset, we can learn, right, what needs to be, what we can do. Rob, you've been a role model in building a diverse, workforce. You have a VP of finance in South America. Your controller is out of Australia. What have you done, right? The strategy you have put in place to increase your talent pool.
So I think of a couple of things. When you swim and the waves are coming against you, or there's a rip or a current, you sometimes you don't want to swim against it, right? You can swim across it, or you can swim with it. So I would say, previously people were leaving companies because they were, it was kind of the fault of the company. And whilst that's still the case sometimes, we're in a world where there is, the great resignation going on and a lot of people moving. And so accepting that versus trying to prevent it is also a different avenue to think about. And then from my perspective, I want every Rocketeer that leaves to tell the world that they had a great time with us and that their time here was valued. The things they built, we're building upon, and that they've accelerated their growth, right, on their journey with us. And so that's really important that we don't discard the relationships that we've spent time building. And I think organizations need to be aware of that. And because the next referrals will come from that person's alumni network, right? And where that's at. So that's one piece is versus trying to fight it and retain. Sometimes it's like, well, some things you just can't do, right? The second one is we are thinking about our promotion cycles. And I'm glad you mentioned mentoring just now, because mentoring is huge, right? And so rather than thinking about promotions about individual performance, we're thinking about it from a slide performance. And a slide meaning, if you're going to promote a senior person to a more senior role, how are they preparing the next person to come up, and that person preparing the next person coming up, and the next person? You have a chain, so that when you are doing a promotion, you're sliding everybody, and everyone's aware, and it's kind of like a team play, right? Hey, if we all do this and mentor each other, we're all going to move up. And so we're thinking about things in that regard. So when we go back to our job families and our career path, there are some roles that we have starred as these are roles that we will hire and grow people into the next things. And so those things are very core. And as you mentioned, some of the more junior roles or entry level. And so we're trying to get more deliberate about how we do that. And that way mentorship becomes a part of how we do things. And then promotion becomes more a celebration for everyone moving, not one person got a promotion and another person didn't. And then they did, and it created a gap. And then that's more stressful, more people to try and fill, and they didn't get promoted, so therefore they leave. And then you're left with a bigger gap. And so I think there's some organizational dynamics to really think about and get your leadership team aligned with, and then build the finance models around it to say, we're not thinking about it as individual progression, we're thinking about it as continual team progression as well.
I also think that beyond the mentorship, there's a sponsorship, right? As a CEO or senior leaders, we need to really be a role model, really put our energy to say, here's the top talent we have in the company. How do we sponsor their growth, right? This is not about 1 year, 2 years, next 3 to 5 years. Who are the top performers we like to sponsor the growth, right? Each of them can be really play a role. You mentioned about CFO hiring. It could be a CRO, could be a CMO, all different types of sponsorship to move a person from a VP level to a C-suite executive level. That definitely requires sponsorship. I've learned so much from both of you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with the audience.
And thanks for joining us.